Hello, History 132. Sorry to be late on this lecture, but here goes. Hope all is well and everyone is staying safe. I've been extremely busy. Oh, but some good news. A new book. Can you read that? It's called From Marion to Montgomery, The Early History of Alabama State. This is my second publication. Many of you, if you're looking for a topic to write your research paper on, I suggest looking at this book. If you're interested in the Marion Nine, the women's that started the Montgomery bus boycott, and the student involvement in the sit-ins, it's all here. Of course, 9 years ago, I also published the Illustrated History of the Tuskegee Airmen. So if you're interested in writing on the famed airmen, here goes. Use this book. Now, I sent you an announcement about your research paper, which is a 5-page research paper, double space. We're going to keep it simple, guys. Choose your topic, and in your own words, tell me who, what, when, and where, how, the conclusion, introduction, everything you want to tell me about this topic. You become the expert on it. You need 5 pages, really. Just the first page, just your title page. Page 2, 3, and 4 will be your text. And of course, your 5th page will be your bibliography, which lists your source. That's really not a difficult assignment, but you got the whole month of November to do it, because we only have one more test, which will be due the last week of November, unless you're a graduating senior. So get to work on your research paper. Give me something that I would enjoy reading, guys, and don't plagiarize. Put it in your own words. Okay, now, this is going to be real quick and sweet, because next week we're going to introduce, starting with World War One, take you through World War One, the Depression, up to World War Two, the Cold War, the end of the Cold War, the modern era that we're living in now. Then we'll have the tests, okay? So we have plenty of time. If you want to do some outside reading, have at it. I suggest reading my books. That would be good. Now, let's say, I know it's a world history class, but America, though, needs to be discussed here. Now, we talked about the institution of slavery, right? From 8 to 10 million Africans was brought across the Atlantic through the Middle Passage and made slaves. And slavery would not end until the Civil War, which occurs between 1861 and 1865. But when the slaves were emancipated, what was it for them to do? Didn't have anything. No land, no money. Only thing they had was each other. I go into deep details in the founding of Alabama State, talking about slavery in Perry County, Alabama. So if you want to read about that, good. Slavery ends. Reconstruction is introduced. It goes from 1865 to 1875, a 10-year window where blacks had the same civil rights as whites, but that was taken away with the election of 1876. This is the first election American president where the person that received the least number of votes became president, the Electoral College. It has occurred 3 times in our history: 1876, 2000 with Bush and Gore, and in 2016 with Trump and Clinton. It's not a common. I don't expect it to happen this year, hopefully, so I urge you to go out and vote. And of course, this history lesson should give you plenty of reason to do so. So, Reconstruction is over. Manifest destiny from the Atlantic to the Pacific, the transcontinental railroads. Native Americans are wiped out, genocide, or forced to live on reservation, or moved to Oklahoma in the case of the Trail of Tears of the 5 civilized tribes on the East Coast: the Cherokees, the Creeks, the Chickasaws, and the Choctaws. Okay. But Jim Crow is legalized in 1900. Separate but equal is the law. It would be the law of the land until the modern civil rights movement and the issuing of the Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. But the civil rights movement would start in here in Montgomery with the arrest of Rosa Parks, and the boycott is led by women associated with Alabama State University. Now, this dual society was in effect everywhere, all over the South, particularly in Alabama. Racism, systemic racism, was ingrained from the founding of the country all the way up until today, and that is a part of that. But also, I would like to point out to you, we talked last week about the scramble for Africa, where the Europeans took control of the continent. You had the British, the French, the Germans, the Italians, the Portuguese, the Belgians, the Spanish, all creating colonies. Now, to get an idea of who colonized what is, if you know any Nigerian, you know they speak what? English. So that would be the English. If you know any Cameroonian, they speak French. That means it was colonized by the French. If you know any Angolian, they speak Portuguese. So this is colonialization, and the civil rights movement and the end of colonialism occurs during the same time. But also we see in Southern Africa, man, the institution of a system called apartheid. And this is done by a renegade bunch of Germans and British called the Boers. I think Aaron Shanks is going to do his research paper on the wars. But this led to the implementation of apartheid. Now, in America, the 64 Civil Rights Act, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, basically gave black civil rights once again that was taken away from them 100 years before. But in South Africa and in Zimbabwe, then known as Rhodesia, named after James Rhodes Scholars, Rhodes College, they implemented a system called apartheid. And of course, that would last all the way up through the 20th century, where my hero came and led them and ended the apartheid system. But a lot of things is going on in the world during that particular time. Colonialism impact would affect the world, and it would lead the world into World War One. Now, the United States does not get away with, it's not escape this new imperialism that we call it. They would participate in the Spanish-American War in 1898, 1899. They will occupy Cuba and the Philippines. They made them colonies of the United States, and of course, that would denigrate with the rise of Castro and the communists in Cuba. But they claimed these to be civilized missions and the incorporation of the lesser man, which the Enlightenment period had deeded that Africans or blacks were at the bottom rim of the classification of man. At the top were Caucasian, in the middle would be Asian, and at the bottom scale would be black. I asked you last week to look up the word eugenics, EUGENICS. But this will lead to conflict among the Europeans and will lead to a world war. But before we get to this war, let's go back to the Civil War. The Civil War was the first modern war. Now remember, during the American Revolution War of 1776 through 1782, the war was basically a guerrilla war fought by the American colonies against the British. They had a single loaded musket. You had to load your musket, fire and run, hide and shoot. During the Civil War, now we have Colt revolvers, 6 guns, 6 pistols, rapid repeating rifles. Gatling guns, dirigibles, balloons, air for reconnaissance and throw bombs, submarines, and of course, ships. But the Civil War created more casualties. I think the latest count is about 500,000 Americans was killed over this issue of slavery. If you combine all our casualties, World War One, World War Two, Vietnam, even today, none would equal the conflict that was created during the Civil War. It is a bloody war. So we're now in the 1900s. Big things are going on. A lot of social unrest, suffrage. Women want to vote. Blacks want justice. They formed the NAACP in 1907, called the Niagara Movement. But global inequality existed, and this led to conflict. This will lead to World War One, the war to end all wars. And guess what, guys? While the war is going on, the flu pandemic breaks out. 1918, and it ravaged the world. The flu started in a hog pen up in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and because of the war, it spread. It took 2 years before the flu ran its course. It is estimated some 50 million people died during this particular flu pandemic. And now we're in the middle of a COVID pandemic. Let's hope it doesn't reach those kind of numbers and that we're around for next year and the following year to enjoy. So I urge you to mask up, practice social distance, be conscious. You have to assume that everyone you come in contact with has the COVID virus. Be safe, stay well, and I'll see you next week when we talk about World War One, the Depression, and World War II. Bye.